First order of business is the first pledge of allegiance. Will all rise?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I'm pretty well trained
There you go. You got it.
now. You're fine. Thank you. Thank you for
Karen, may I have roll call, please?
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Model.
Here.
Trustee Paveza.
Here.
Trustee Matal. Trustee Snyder.
Here.
Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
Mayor Straub.
Here. Our first order of business is, of course, the residents' comments. If anyone would like to speak, either now or later during the agenda item, please sign up on the sheet up here. And if there's anybody there is no Q&A per se, but if anybody does have a question they want to have us address when the stereogenics topic comes up, we'll be happy to add that to the list if you decide to talk first. But if you want to wait until the item comes up, that's fine. We ask you not to do both since it might be redundant. Okay? So are there any residents that would like to address the board at this time? I'm sorry. Yeah, you have to go to the microphone, introduce yourself, where you're from, and then you have
My name's good afternoon, gentlemen. My name's Mike Moreno. I'm from 9171 Drew Avenue and a 20-year resident of my wonderful village. I just have a couple questions concerns that I would like addressed. One of them is probably the most important one that one of the commissioners spoke about, and that's property values after the barn is built, and especially since it's such a narrow piece of land and goes straight through, and it would affect the neighbors and the proximity. Sharon Williams' main concern was the water drainage, and we don't know if that has been addressed, but there's a couple things that have not been addressed, and that's primarily if our home values would drop, and especially since the barn is oversized and over height, and we don't know if the 5th acre, which probably would be the least invasive, if it's in fact a flood zone or not, or if it has been checked to see if it is a flood zone or not. And the concern is because it's oversized and over height, and it would affect some of the neighbors, especially where it's being built, like the Smolas and the other neighbors behind, and the neighbors on 91st. But one of my concerns also was if there was going to be regulation on the bacterium from the horses being there, which I don't know of, and of any diseases that affect humans, which we will be evidently a part of. We may not have the horse barn, but we will become part of the horse barn. Also, if there's any regulation or if anybody's going to take any regulation on the amount of manure and pickup of the manure, because you will get stench and you will get horse flies, and I don't know if that's a bacterium or even a byproduct of anthrax or anything like that, which I'm not aware of, but I'm just concerned for our neighbors and the oversize, and if there's any regulations on that, especially on bacterium and pickup of the horse manure on a regular basis so it doesn't affect the neighbors. And that's because of the short proximity and the narrowness. If it's a wide open field, I think it would be beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Mike Moreno. Is there anyone else like to address the board before we go into the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no one. we will move on to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the village board, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event it will be removed. Under minutes, we have 5A, approval of regular board meeting of September 24th, 2018. B, approval of plan commission meeting of October 1st, 2018. Under ordinances, we have 6C.
Remove.
Okay. D, approval of ordinance denying an amendment to section 7, whoops, moved too fast there. Okay, 7J of the zoning ordinance to permit a chain link fence as a special use in non-residential districts, D20, 2018, 16W020 79th Street, Dedevsky. E, approval of an ordinance granting a variation as per the Village of Burr Ridge sign ordinance for approval of 3 wall signs in a manufacturing district. That's S08 2018, located at 6860 North Frontage Road, Will. F, approval of an ordinance granting variations as per the Village of Burr Ridge sign ordinance for approval of an additional ground sign and increase the amount of permitted signage on the property to 460 square feet. At S09 2018, located at 7010 County Line Road, Cadence. Nothing under resolutions. Under considerations, we have approval of recommendation to award a contract for purchase of a mini hydraulic excavator to replace Public Works backhoe Unit 41 to Patton Industries Incorporated, of Elmhurst, in the amount of $139,955. E, receive and file resignation letter from part-time receptionist Kelly Feehan. F, authorization to fill part-time reception position vacated by the resignation of Kelly Feehan. G, approval request for raffle license for St. Alphonsus St. Patrick's School and hosting facility license for Chicago Marriott Southwest Burr Ridge for its gala fundraising event on February 23rd, 2019, with ticket sales between November 15th, 2018 and February 22nd, 2019. H, approval of vendor list in the amount of $124,790.63 for all funds, plus $193,677.30 for payroll, for a grand total of $318,467.93, which includes $34,261 for special expenditures for a Ford utility police vehicle. I have a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda. We have 5A and B. We have 6, D and E and F. 8, D, E, F, G, and H.
So moved. Second.
Motion to second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who seconded.
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Under ordinances, we have 6A, consideration of an ordinance amending a section of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code, and the assistant to the village administrator, Evan Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, this is an amendment to the municipal code prohibiting parking on the northbound side of McClintock Drive. So McClintock Drive is the road in our downtown district that originates around the Pace Lot and terminates on Burr Ridge Parkway, north of the TCF building. It kind of wraps around the vacant parcel in our downtown. Currently, the primary purpose of this proposed change is to accommodate commuters parking their cars for the Pace Park and Ride facility on Lincolnshire Drive, kind of near Chase Moore behind County Line Square. Parking is currently permitted on both sides of McClintock Drive. However, commuters are not aware of this parking option, and we did not want to encourage on-street parking until proper controls were in place on this particular street. The north and the east-west sides of the street were primarily chosen due to the location of the sidewalk on that side of the street. So essentially what is happening here, this is a restriction to park on one side of McClintock Drive, the side with legal parking being permitted on the side where the sidewalk is located. We don't want people crossing the road early in the morning when it might be dark, or later at night when it might be dark, to get to a sidewalk that they can walk on. We've received multiple inquiries, ongoing inquiries from the village and the public at large regarding the capacity at the Pace facility. If you've been there in the morning, you'll know that it's quite busy. We tend to be very overparked there. There's about 85 spaces in that facility. We routinely see over 100 cars parked in that lot. Pace is resistant to expanding their service right now. They appear to be short on buses. They don't have state funding to buy additional buses to accommodate the capacity. But at the same time, staff has wanted to put some solution forward in order to allow commuters to legally park around Pace slots so they can use the bus to get downtown. It's a fantastic facility to have in Burr Ridge. So this is an option to really expand a few parking spots to be available on McClintock Drive for those commuters to use in the morning. So as stated, this is an ordinance to amend the Section 35 of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code to permit parking on one side of the street of McClintock Drive. If you have any further questions, Dave Preissig is here to help elaborate on them, but I will be here as well. Thank you.
This has been an ongoing topic. We've been fielding emails and phone calls for months. When the Pace lot first opened up, we were having a hard time getting people on it. But then once they put the new buses out, they became so popular here, as well as now they opened up I think a 600 car parking lot, I think in Plainfield. I've sold 300, 600, it's in the hundreds. That sometimes when they get here, it's even full, or the standing room only. But that being said, the people that are here want a place to park. And they're parking and trying to avoid parking in the shopping center. Lo and behold, we found out that parking is already allowed on McClintock, but not currently marked as such. So this is it's kind of a formality that's already permitted, but is a formality. But wanted to bring that up for anybody that was curious about it. But now, by all means, any trustees that have questions of Evan, please feel free. Trustee Schiappa?
So how will you communicate to the commuters that it's legal to park on that side of McClintock?
We're going to go ahead and get the signs ordered. I think we're going to not communicate that until the signs are ordered in the ground. We don't want people parking in places where there aren't signs in the ground. Again, this is an amendment to prohibit parking on one side of the street. So we don't want to change the ordinance and then have people go out there and park where there's no signs. Once those signs are in the ground, we'll be putting this on our front page, as well as putting it on all our social media channels for communication for the public to see.
Be helpful to put a sign maybe at the Pace lot?
Certainly. There'll be likely some communication on the site just to dictate that, hey, this is now permitted. So yes, to your point.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions of trustees? Do I have a motion to approve 5A or 6A?
So moved.
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Beza?
Yes.
Trustee Model? Yes. Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Matal? Yes. Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Now, 6B.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an amendment to the municipal code regarding smoking and electronic cigarettes. The draft amendment regulates electronic cigarettes in the same manner as smoking traditional tobacco products such as cigarettes, pipes, cigars, things like that.
Yes.
In summary, smoking is not permitted in public places, places of employment within the village, or within 15 feet of an entrance to an enclosed area. Other suburbs have adopted this type of regulation in the past, so essentially what we're doing here is we're saying there are existing smoking regulations that currently are in the books in Burr Ridge, and now we're going to do the same type of regulation to prohibit the use of electronic cigarettes in those exact same locations. Again, this is something that other towns have used frequently. We're not the first town to do this, but this was brought to our attention by residents who felt that the village should consider such a ban on electronic cigarettes.
And this subject came up by a resident who told me they were in a restaurant in Westmont where somebody started smoking, vaping right next to them, and it was not restricted in that village. So they brought it to our attention and said, what about Burr Ridge? Well, lo and behold, it wasn't there. So it's just, again, trying to tighten up the rules to make sure vaping is not allowed. That's also thought to have some significant health risks. Not allow vaping also in Burr Ridge restaurants.
How do you enforce that? What if someone is there a fine for smoking in public places, or?
I forget the exact penalty, but it's enforced the exact, I'm going to delegate to the attorney here.
Well, you cite them you give them a ticket, essentially.
right,
I would
that's what I-
imagine you warn them the first time.
Right.
And say it isn't allowed here if you didn't know that. And if it persists or if it's intentional, they can be cited.
Trustee Francis?
Just a comment. Many of us can remember back when cigarette smoking was being outlawed in public places. Many of the villages had their own rules and regulations, and it took the state at one point to come up with an all-encompassing statewide ban on cigarette smoking, cigar smoking, and pipe smoking in public places. And I would hope that at some point in time the state would do the same for e-cigarettes and vaping so that it's consistent from village to village, so that you won't go from Burr Ridge to Westmont to Oak Brook to some other community. And one community you can use these products in public, and other communities you can't. So it's, I would hope there be some consistency from the state at some point in time. My only comment. Thank you.
There is a change in the state law, doesn't do exactly what you're mentioning, but has created regulations for e-cigarettes and vaping regarding the sale of those products that is now the same as cigarettes. It doesn't go as far as what you're mentioning, but it begins that process, I think.
Thank you.
So we want to tighten up the books. May I have a motion to pass 5A, or sorry, 6B?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Now, 6C, the item that was pulled off the consent agenda.
Thank you. This is a recommendation that came from us from the Plan Commission at their previous meeting on October 1st. Excuse me. This is VO 5 2018. It's 15 West 069 and 15 West 081 91st Street. The petitioner requested variations from Section 4 of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to permit a detached accessory structure taller than 15 feet in mean height and greater than 2,500 square feet on a property in the R2B residential district. The resident earlier this evening commented about the irregular shape of this lot. He's exactly right. This is a unique lot in its orientation. This property is 5 acres in size, but as you can see by my cursor here, it's actually been bisected, not by a right-of-way, but truly by another piece of land, by a ComEd-owned piece of land. So this person's property, the petitioner's property, actually is in 2 separate, we'll call it parcels, but it's 1 lot of record. The petitioner does have an easement on the east side of this, we'll call it traverse right here, 16 feet in width in order to get from the property to the north to the property to the south. But again, this is a 5-acre property. It's very deep. I think it's about 1,000 to 1,100 feet deep. Runs from 91st Street almost the entire way to the train tracks down by the Des Plaines River. The reason for the variations is the petitioner is attempting to locate some horses on his property. He's a newly annexed property into the village and recently built a new single-family home on the property and is attempting to build a barn with a riding arena to store horses on it. In Burr Ridge, if you have 5 acres, you can store horses on your property without a permit or any sort of special use approval. It's just granted to you by right. So again, 5 acres of property, which this petitioner does have, they're allowed to legally store horses, 1 horse per 20,000 square feet of land. So this petitioner can store up to 10 horses on the property. Petitioners say that they will have no more than 5 horses on the property, but as an aside, the reason for the variations, as I said, is the property, the detached accessory structure would be taller in mean height and larger in square footage than is normally permitted under the zoning ordinance. And the purpose of that is the petitioner is attempting to build a riding arena along with some horse stables. So it's got an area to keep the horses just on a regular basis, but then an indoor riding arena in which to enjoy the horses on a year-round basis. So in all, the mean height of the proposed structure is approximately 21 feet, and the building is approximately 5,900 square feet in size were it to be built on the subject property. I see the petitioner here this evening. If there are any further questions regarding what the Plan Commission recommended, the Plan Commission did recommend unanimously that this property be approved for the variations to build the structure. There were several conditions that were attached with the recommendation. Those are involved. Those are listed in the summary. Those being the structure shall observe all 50-foot setbacks as are required by the zoning ordinance. No third-party or commercial boarding shall be permitted. A paved access road shall be constructed connecting the barn to 91st Street. No horse trailer storage shall be permitted to be stored on the property, and only one accessory building shall be permitted on the property. The last one is important to note because normally residents in the village are entitled to build 2 accessory structures of 2,500 square feet each, 5,000 square feet in total. Because this barn is in the range of 5,000 square feet, they said, we're going to limit you, or we at least recommend that you be limited to 1 accessory structure, since the one that you would want to build would be about the size of approximately 2 accessory structures legally. So those 5 conditions are recommended by the Plan Commission. Again, this was a 7-0 vote by the Plan Commission at their October 1st hearing. Commissioner Farrell is here this evening to answer any further questions, but I'll be here to answer them as well. Thank you.
Trustees, any questions of Evan? Trustee Scapa?
Was the parcel annexed into Burr Ridge?
Yes, last year it was annexed straight away into Burr Ridge and rezoned R2B, yes.
Okay. Didn't want to hear from.
Well, let's leave it here first, and then we'll ask residents, or ask them to come up. Not the resident, but the petitioner.
We can have the petitioner come up.
Okay. Okay, certainly. The petitioner is here.
I am.
Could you come to the microphone, please?
Sure.
And introduce yourself.
Sure. Name is Peter Catania. I live at 15 West 069 91st Street, Burr Ridge.
Okay. You have questions, trustee?
So can you tell us more about the improvement you did to that lot?
They're right. The lot is just over 5 acres. When we bought it, there were about 12 buildings on the property. 10 of them were abandoned, fallen in, basically dangerous. Those have all been since removed. We did put a house on the property, set back off the road about 190 feet. The reason why we bought this property is a long, nice, narrow, well, you don't have a picture, sorry. Long, nice, narrow piece of property. Figured the barn out back would be a good place to put it. Wouldn't be visible from the street. We're not here to be an eyesore or anything. The horses that we do have are pets. These aren't animals that other people own, that other people ride. This is purely for our enjoyment only. My wife and I have had horses for over 25 years. So once again, not only were there buildings on this property, but we took over 600 tires off the property. We took 32 truckloads of steel, cars, metal, neighbor's garbage off the property was removed. I mean, it was basically an eyesore that you could not believe. We spent $25,000 to remove trees on the property that were dead, fallen, that the arborist said they should have fallen a long time ago. So, we have done a lot to the property. We're very proud of the property. We're very proud to live in Burr Ridge.
Thank you.
Any questions of the petitioner? Trustee
Just a
Johnson?
comment about the property itself, and thank you for
Yes.
all the cleanup hard work you've done and the improvements you've done, and I'm surely it's much better than when you first came upon it. But I can't recall in my time here with the village over 20 years of a property that's bisected by another property.
Yes.
This is unique, truly unique, and just to locate the barn on the southern portion of the property it's the least obtrusive. We can all remember back in the day when there were horse farms here in Burr Ridge, several horse farms, several properties with livestock, and so this is why we've always allowed this on parcels over 5 acres. So, thank you.
Any questions? Is there anyone at the, any residents that'd like to address this topic that hasn't spoken yet? Please come to the microphone.
My name is Helena Smola, and I live 9161 Drew Avenue. We built our home 20 years ago. That home was built for $1 million. The backyard of our home, it's directly to the new property. And because of the size of this building, my backyard will be all building, huge building, very tall building. So my question is, because the building's gonna be so huge, so big, we heard that that's gonna be also wall built. So we wanna know how tall the wall will be built, or the fence, what kind of material he's gonna use to build the wall.
So I can take those questions.
My next question is, if he built the wall between our property, is he's gonna do any landscaping so I don't have to look in that wall? I own indoor swimming pool. I love the trees. I love birds. Behind us there's forest, so we have a normal day wildlife in our backyard. So we are very concerned about the wall and the landscaping around the wall. The next question is about the wetland. Of course, there is 5 acres of the land, but when my yard finished and Mr. Moreno yard, then there is a wetland. I know because I've been there for 20 years. So I want to know if that wetland will be dry out, that wetland, are they going to build a special septic for the waste for the horses? How many gallons the septic will be? How many times a month, or how they gonna empty out the septics? And the last thing is that I am very allergic to insects. That's why we built home with the indoor swimming pool. And I am very concerned about the waste from the horses. The more waste we're gonna have in our backyard, the more insects we're gonna have. Are they gonna be responsible for spraying the insects, if that's healthy for animals or for us? And I think I think that's it.
Okay, Helene, were you able to attend the Plan Commission meeting also?
Excuse me?
Were you able to attend the Plan Commission meeting to ask these questions?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to know.
Yes, I was here, but I didn't ask questions.
Oh, okay.
I was just listening. And after meeting, when I came back home, I realized how tall and how big the building will be. And it's gonna cover all my backyard, from the beginning to the end, and a little bit of Mr. Moreno property. And not only that, I realized it's gonna be a wall. So if he's gonna build a wall, I wanna know if he's gonna build a landscaping, so we don't have to, nobody likes walls.
Right.
I don't, I like trees. And right now, they did clean up the backyard, but in the same time, when they clean up the backyard, they cut all the trees, everything. So there is just the land. So we wanna know where, after he builds the building, what we gonna be looking at every day.
Well, thank you.
And one more thing, I'm sorry, one more thing very important.
Ma'am, your time is
I know,
way
one
over.
more thing
way
very
over.
important. Before the construction start for his home, I called Blue Ridge Village and I asked them why we don't have the fence, construction fence around. I was told by building department that this area is not for Blue Ridge. I have to call Wheaton. So I want to know, before the construction starts in that big building, are they going to build the construction fence? Or it's going to be open, like when they built the house, everything was open. So there was no secure fence around. I have grandkids and children, and if they build something big like that, we want to know if they're going to be, fence that will protect us from the construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Is there anyone else who'd like to address this?
John, 7515 Drew. I'm very concerned with the precedent we may be setting by allowing a building that is 45% larger than currently allowed under village zoning ordinances. The luxury we have living within a village with zoning regulations is it offers additional protection to the residents regarding the types of land usage and structures allowed around us. I have witnessed the process regarding variations and how certain criteria must be met, namely a hardship, whether it be buildable space on a property, a strange lot, an old construction prior to the zoning ordinances that created difficulties for a petitioner. In the finding of facts submitted by the petitioner for this project, under question A, I'll read, because of a particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of a specific property involved a particular hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. The petitioner's response to this was, we ask for the provisions so that we may build a barn with 5 stalls and a riding arena in order to have our horses in our backyard. This is a want. This is not a hardship. Under current zoning, the petitioner is able to build a building of sufficient size to satisfy their needs of having their horses on their property. Question E. The alleged difficulty of hardship is caused by this ordinance and has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property. The petitioner responded, we purchased the property and built our primary house on the lot so we may have horses in the backyard. The petitioner had to do a lot of research before building a house, and because they did not thoroughly understand the village ordinances regarding outbuildings, does not make this a hardship. Under current zoning, they are able to have their horses and a reasonable building. I see no hardship, and I am in fear of what my neighbor may be able to do on their property if such a variation is granted. This would set a very dangerous precedent for our village. Secondly, I believe the Plan Commission commissioners were misguided by staff regarding the allowable buildings on the petitioner property. Under Burr Ridge Zoning Ordinance, Section 4, Part H, Number 10, Subpart C, it states, for a lot on record in R2 or R2B district, accessory buildings shall be permitted as follows, maximum 2. Plus 1 additional building for every 2 acres that the property exceeds 5 acres. I would like to point out that the ordinance does take into consideration large lots, but unfortunately the petitioner's property does not meet this criteria. The maximum floor area ratio for building 1 cannot exceed 2,500 square feet. The maximum floor area for building 2 is 750 square feet. In the Plan Commission meeting, staff suggested that 2 2,500 square foot buildings were allowed. In fact, they are not. One 2,500 square foot building and one 750 square foot building for a combined area of 3,250 square feet are allowed. I feel this was a major piece of misinformation the Plan Commission based their decision on, thinking that the sum of 5,000 square feet for 2 buildings was allowed. For this reason, I believe that this variation should either be denied or sent back to the Plan Commission for further review.
Anyone else like to address this topic? No on the list? Okay. Back to the board. And Evan, I would like to have you answer some of the questions I know Helene asked.
Start with Helene's? Yes. I understand the first one, your question would be the height of the fence. Or at least the fence came up in your conversation. The petitioner has applied for a permit for a 5-foot tall white rail fence that would be permitted. That petition has already been approved by staff. That fence will pretty much encompass the entire backyard of the property. You can have fences in the rear yard of your property in Burr Ridge. They cannot broach the rear wall of your property though. So this is quite a bit of fence, but this will be kind of a traditional horse farm looking fence, that white split rail fence that you see on other traditional horse farm properties. Again, that'll be 5 feet tall. You also talked about the height of the wall. I'm assuming that you mean the height of the building when you say height of the wall, or at least the height of the side of the building. We had seen plans that showed they were about 15 feet in height on the side of the building, and then the roof would be pretty flat, all in all. We had measured the mean height being about between 20 and 21 feet on the mean height. So we're not talking a structure that's too much taller roof-wise than the height of the walls. So this will be primarily at least half of the property, or at least 2/3 of the building's height will be found in the wall structure, if that makes sense.
So it won't be a wall in addition to the fence, it's just the wall of the...
It's the side of the building. So there's a fence, and then at least 50 feet in from the property line, which is where the zoning ordinance says that legally a barn of this type has to be stored 50 feet off of the setback in every lot line. So I think it'll be something like 80 feet from the back of the person's property at 9161 Drew. You had also mentioned wetlands on the property, specifically when will they dry out? We'll take this one at a time. The wetlands on the property, true wetlands are defined by the federal government and administered by the county. The wetlands are primarily located on this southern portion of the property, south of the ComEd line. There was a comment earlier about why could the horse barn not be located here. This same question was asked by the Plan Commission, and the answer is that 90% of this southern property is a wetland, and so it would be very challenging to build anything of real use on this southern property here. So this southern portion is basically a wet area. The wetland is different than a low-lying wet area, if that makes sense. So a wetland is a federally protected area, or else there are other areas on your property that might be a low spot where water collects. Those are not wetlands, those are just wet areas on your property. Those are not governed by the village. The only comment I'll make about those is that when we take grading into account, the grading has to go with the land. There has to be a natural flow to the land, and if the land is, if the property on this case is flowing north to south, away from 91st Street toward the river, because that river is the low point, it's created that low point through years of erosion. The petitioner can't invert the property to have the property flow south to north. That's not how it works. We have to have the grading work with the property's natural gradient. So while there might be some change in grading, if the property were allowed this detached accessory structure, it would have to generally match the contours of the property already there. They can't change the existing path. If it flows away, they have to work with with that agent already. There was also a question about, will there be a septic tank / how will the animal waste be stored? The petitioner testified that the animal waste will be stored in a closed container on the property near either inside the barn or near the barn. There will be no buried animal waste. Animal waste will be removed via some sort of service on a regular basis. And that was as far as we got on that question.
Landscaping?
Landscaping next to the fence, or I don't believe we actually got into that question. I'd invite the petitioner to comment on that particular item, but there were no recommendations to include landscaping of any kind next to the fence or next to the barn as proposed. So there weren't any conditions that they could only do it if trees were installed or the like. I don't know if there are plans to save trees in that area. The barn is proposed to be located really close to the star on the map here. We tried to put that star as close as possible to try and provide some sort of spatial clue as to where the property would actually be built, or the structure would actually be built. And therefore, I don't know if there are trees there that can be saved, but I would invite the petitioner to comment. I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying I just don't know. There were no conditions attached to putting new trees into replacing landscaping that may have been torn out when the property was clean. If that's something you'd like to talk about and include, we certainly can, but that's your prerogative.
Trustee Model?
So, but Evan, were you saying that this is not a federal wetland, this is a wet area, correct?
It's more of a wet area. The question of during the construction of the principal house, there was some concern that drainage was affected during that particular process. Certainly, when you build a house, you're going to affect some of the drainage overall on the property. It's kind of an expectation of when you build. But there are no federal wetlands that would be illegal to build in and around the area where the property or the barn is proposed.
Evan, the planning commission saw how the property was prior to the petitioner purchasing the property, correct? With all of the steel and all of the cars and everything else. Am I right or wrong?
I don't know. I mean, that was about 18 months ago. This was February of 17 when they were annexed into the village. It's very possible that they may have gone to the site, but the plan commissioners usually do visit every site that they come before them. There's 3 or 4 per plan commission, and most of them do make a habit of going there. I don't think anybody doubts that some cleanup and beautification has occurred on the property in the last 18 months.
Sounds like the petitioner spent quite a bit of money to maintain and correct the situation when the neighbors were looking at this the whole time. I wouldn't want to look at steel and falling down trees, and all of a sudden the petitioner's cleaned it all up.
Tires?
Yeah, 600 tires and the rest, so it sounds like the
By the sound
petitioner's
of
done
it,
a nice
they're not
job.
done yet. It sounds like there's even more to go further south you get.
Okay.
So, I mean, if they're going to try and bring in horses, I wouldn't want to ride them around rusty cars. So,
Thank you.
So I asked to get this removed from the consent agenda because I agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. With the only exception, I have hesitation regarding no horse trailer storage shall be permitted on the property, which suggests that it would not be possible for him to transport horses to and from the property. And it's my understanding that the horse trailers will be stored off-site permanently, but there may be an occasion where he may have a trailer overnight, may leave very early in the morning to go to an event with his children. Like he'd mentioned before, these are horses for his family. These are his pets, just like we have pets as dogs or cats. He spent quite a bit of money improving the land. He's got a beautiful home there, and he's going to put a horse barn in the back. And regarding precedent, I mean, I lived behind someone in my prior house in Burridge that had a building just as tall and just as big on a 5-acre lot. And that's the beauty of Burridge and these large estate lots, that you can put these structures in for horses, or maybe some big lawn equipment, to maintain a 5-acre parcel. So that's my suggestion on the horse trailer storage, is to have limited trailer storage on the property, so that he may store it maybe overnight, so that he may leave early in the morning, or it's nothing that he would maintain permanently. I just don't want him to get cited if he has the trailer on site to pick up his horses to go somewhere, or drop them off, or take them to the vet. So that's my recommendation.
If we want to clarify that a bit more, staff's interpretation of the condition was that no permanent storage would be permitted. We did not interpret the Plan Commission's recommendation to be if you had the trailer there for a few hours to move horses, that it would be a citation on a code violation. However, if you'd like to more properly clarify what that actually looks like, we're always welcome to more clarification, specificity. It's just clearer for all parties. But we did not take that as a, certainly if he owns 10 horses and 5 will be kept on site, at some point those horses will be rotated out. And again, one of the conditions is to have a paved access road constructed connecting the barn to 91st Street. That was our interpretation, that there will be a need to occasionally have service vehicles on the property to service the barn. So again, it's your prerogative to make that as specific as you like. But again, it was staff's understanding that just maintenance of the horse facilities, they'd occasionally be there. But if it's there for 2 weeks, that's a whole nother story.
Right.
So.
Maybe we can just add no permanent horse trailer storage shall be permitted on property. Just for clarification.
A question for trustees Francis. I was wondering if you happen to know, recall any suggested timeframes for storage? Do you remember of any other properties that have come through the village? You've been.
No, but I think we used the word incidental storage in the past, occasional storage, overnight storage. Temporary storage, those types of words. I don't think we ever had a limit to 1 day or 2 days or 3 days a month, anything like that. It was just occasional storage.
I think no permanent storage is sufficient for our needs, yeah.
Or temporary storage.
Can you address the other, one of the other individual that came up about the size, 2,500 plus 7? I thought it was 2,500, 2,500.
If there was an error, I didn't catch it, honestly. It was my understanding that it was 2 2,500 square foot structures. If that's not the case, we're happy to look at that, but I just don't recall.
Will that cause a problem with the building of this thing as it's 5,000 feet?
I don't know.
The other concern was insects and mosquitoes. Is that usually a concern with barns? I don't know. Historically, when we've had barns in the area, have you seen more mosquitoes?
That question came up at the Plan Commission, particularly horseflies. The gentleman, Mr. Moreno, did ask that. It sounded like from the petitioner's experience owning these horses that as long as they're stored inside, those problems will remain inside. Whatever does stink or whatever, those problems will be relegated to wherever the horses live. If they live outside, then sure, you'll have some flies. But because this is going to be an enclosed stable that'll be cleaned regularly, I don't foresee any issue of public health problems arising.
And used for personal use as well. It's not like it's a.
Right.
Right. Both times I've been to the property, the petitioner was at their other property cleaning their horse barn.
Okay.
Trustee Francis?
Old used tires are notorious breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Removing 600 plus tires from the site and several more to go should reduce the mosquito problem that the site previously had. So it's a big plus in the eliminating the mosquito population from that area. Get rid of those tires.
Good point. Anybody else?
Briefly?
Yes, Village Attorney.
Just to address the issue raised by Trustee Snyder. If you believe there is information that the Plan Commission did not have in front of it to consider in reaching their conclusions, the board has the option under your code to send a matter back to the Plan Commission for further consideration, and then they make the recommendation once again back to the board if you believe that's information that they need to take a closer look at.
Thank you.
If you believe there is information, then the question is there enough to affect the decisions? Yeah.
That's up to the Plan Commission.
Trustee Baveza?
Over the years, I know it's just like in other political efforts, you usually don't get unanimous, and I saw that the Plan Commission was 7-0 on this project. The only thing that I would be interested in knowing is there a problem like the other resident brought up, where one of the structures should not be over 750 feet. That would be the only thing that I would think would be a problem.
Well, one of the conditions is that only one building shall be permitted on the property. So if this were built, this is it. They're not getting another shed or whatever on the back of the property. So this is what they're choosing to spend their accessory building credits on, for lack of a better word. So certainly I think that your assertion is correct, that if that condition were not involved, yes, that might affect how they build, but the Plan Commission has said they need to limit it to one only, because this is a sizable structure.
Are there any trustees that would like to hear from the Plan Commissioner that's here tonight for any additional clarification? If so, we can ask her to come up. If not, Trustee Schiappa, do you have a question?
No, I'd like to make a motion. So I'd like to move to approve the ordinance, to approve a variation from the Village of Blue Ridge ordinance to permit a detached accessory structure taller than 15 feet, and a mean height and larger than 2,500 square feet in area, at a property in the R2B residential district, adding to the fourth condition, no permanent horse trailer storage shall be permitted on the property.
I second it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. There's no items under resolutions, but under considerations. We have a continued discussion regarding September 24, 2018 presentation of fiscal year 27-18 audit.
Thank you. At your last board meeting, the presentation of the 17-18 audit was tabled from the last discussion to allow for additional time to review. Scott Termine, the partner with the village's audit firm BKD, is here again to briefly recap the audit process and to answer any questions the village board may have. Scott, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks again to the board and to finance staff again for all their assistance during the audit. I won't repeat all my comments from the last time, but I will remind you that as part of our audit, we do provide two main deliverables, which are the audited financial statements and then management letter, essentially, to you, the board, summarizing the results of our engagement. So key points there are that we were able to issue what we refer to as a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the best form of opinion that you can get on the financial statements. And in conducting the audit, we did not encounter any significant difficulties or disagreements with management, and we are not including any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the internal control structure as part of our letter. So with that, I'll just pause and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of the auditor?
No.
Trustee Francis?
Yes, just two questions and a comment. First, thank you for an in-depth review. Appreciate it. It's well written and quite thorough and many details. Thank you. You had some comments about the GASB requirements that are being,
Sure.
the new requirements, and how the village needs to conform or has conformed with those. And you could go into that in a little more detail, please?
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of two aspects there I'd cover for you. Is first, you were required a couple of years back to implement new standards regarding the reporting of pension liabilities, which you did do, and those are properly presented as in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The next wave will come next year, where we're going to bring in the liabilities regarding other post-employment benefits, so essentially health care benefits that retirees are entitled to. So those are going to hit the balance sheet for the first time, and it's very similar to the reporting of the pension liabilities in that the information has historically been included in the footnotes to the financial statements, but has not been brought into the financial statements and balance sheet themselves. So that will be affected for the first time next year.
Okay, thank you. And second question, if we go to the attachments in the back of the report, there are some comments about misstatements. Could you define the accounting version of the term misstatement, please?
Sure, sure. So as we conduct our audit, we might encounter two different types of adjustments. That could be an adjustment that we actually propose to management that they post to the financial statements. Or as we do our audit, we may encounter misstatements or differences that we deem to be immaterial. So we're required to accumulate those as we do our work to make sure that we don't end up with a situation where we might have 20 immaterial differences that when taken together could be material. And those are the adjustments that are attached to that letter and are summarized for you there just to provide you with some additional information on those items.
So they're adjustments, and on the big scope of things, they're less than 2% typically. Some are tenths of a percent, so they're very
material, so we
minor in
just
nature.
agree with management essentially not to post those.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for a well-written, concise report. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the healthcare, not ours, but in general. Do you have any idea how this healthcare escrow is going to affect the statements?
So there's a liability that will come onto the statements. If you have the report there, there is some footnote disclosures around those. I do have to say that the requirements under the new standard do impact the way that those liabilities are accounted for. So it's not going to be an exact translation in the new format. But it would give you at least some perspective on what that liability might look like. And that is in the other post-employment benefit disclosure that you will find on page 60 through 62 in the financial statements. So the actuarial accrued liability at 4/30/2016, which was the last time that you did a full valuation, was about $1.8 million. And under the current standards, you have only reported an obligation of about $700,000, so a delta of about $1.1 million.
Any questions of the auditor? Any motion of anything new? Just to, anything to accept, present, formalize? Okay. Scott, well, thank you very much.
No, I think wonderful job, very thorough, very detailed. Question about the investment income, I mean, is it because of the investment experience changes every year, or?
Yeah, certainly market conditions do go into that, absolutely, yes.
What is it invested in typically, like?
Investments are carried at fair value.
Okay.
So just as you encounter in your own personal portfolio, as those swings occur, there are unrealized gains that happen, and those are recognized within the investment income as well.
And the portfolio is diversified?
Yes, so in particular, the pension funds investments, there are certainly policies on both the village side and the pension fund in terms of what those allowable investments are, and you are complying with those guidelines, absolutely.
Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much, appreciate it.
All right, thank you all again.
Guy, may I have the,
Everybody sign up?
yeah.
Good, thank you.
The, we need, the attorney, village attorney recommended that we have a motion to accept and file the audit.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Mitchell?
Yes.
6-0.
That's where I want to sign in.
Yeah, you'll be the last one. We're past the deadline, but you're the last one. Appreciate it. Army?
Other than placebo benefits, I can't think of any benefits.
I don't know how much I appreciate it. very much. Nice having you here. Okay, we are going to go give the, under considerations 8B, update regarding Sterigenics in Willowbrook, Illinois. I want to apologize. Last meeting I was not here. I wish I could have been, but was not. And occasionally I have to miss a meeting. So, but I know this is a very important topic. We've been on it daily, not hourly, and trying every different angle we can, and responding to as many emails as we can, and looking into the various things. What I'm going to ask now is we're going to have kind of in 3 stages. First stage is to have an update from our assistant village administrator and our attorney. We'll also have some comments or questions that the board might have, which time I'll go to the residents, and you'll have a chance to ask questions. And if there's, not sure if we'll use 2 microphones or 1 at this time. We'll see how it goes. But we'll start it now with an update from Evan Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. So just briefly, going back a few weeks, just to kind of start from a little bit earlier to provide more context. On the 21st of February, additional stack testing of the Sterigenics facility was completed. That was monitored by a number of public agencies. Those results are still forthcoming. The EPA has said that those should be available by the end of the month. On Friday, the 28th, Mayor Straub and myself participated in a briefing held by the US EPA. Virtually all elected officials that represent all or some part of Burr Ridge were present. There were representatives from the senators, several US representatives from the House were on the line, state senators, state representative, several mayors, and then staffs of all respective agencies were in attendance. I think we had estimated that over 30 persons were at that meeting. Several actions were committed to by the EPA at that meeting. Those included a statement regarding the status of the investigation, commitment to hold a second community meeting either in Willowbrook or in Burr Ridge after the stack test analysis is completed, as well as a commitment to include Burr Ridge in any and all future regional ambient testing. At this time, we had been told that the statement regarding the situation from the EPA would be issued by the end of last week. It is now Monday, and today was a federal holiday, so they were not there today. But again, at this time, no statement had been issued that was asked for and requested by the mayor as of last week. Following up from that meeting on October 1st, Mayor Straub, Trilla, and Weaver of Willowbrook and Darien sent a letter to the governor's office requesting that the state of Illinois either provide definitive documentation that Sterigenics does not pose any public health threat, or that the state of Illinois take immediate action to shut down Sterigenics. That was October 1st. On October 2nd, the Illinois EPA issued a press release stating they've referred an enforcement action to the Illinois Attorney General against Sterigenics. ILEPA is requesting that the Attorney General seek an enjoinment against Sterigenics from continuing their operations that may result in any emissions of ETO either until a complete review is completed by the US EPA or until the US EPA otherwise assures the community that resumed operations would not present an elevated health risk. We received a press release from the Ethylene Oxide Sterilization Association, the EOSA, regarding the use and value of ETO. From our understanding, the EOSA is a nonprofit organization that advances the interests of a diverse community of ETO suppliers, in-house sterilizers, manufacturers, and other laboratories regarding this facility type. In speaking with some of our community groups, staff has learned that the VP of Sterigenics is the president of EOSA. So the VP of Sterigenics is representing the lobbying firm that is lobbying the EPA on this matter. And then tonight, one of our considerations on the agenda for the board is consideration of a contract with GHD Services for ambient air testing in Burr Ridge. GHD Services is already under contract with the Village of Willowbrook, and we had requested that if they were needed, that they become our contractor of record as well. The Burr Ridge contract with GHD is a Plan B that's proposed only if the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency fails to complete ambient air testing in Burr Ridge in a timely manner. And timely manner is defined by whatever the Board of Trustees defines that to be. So it's their prerogative when they're used. I'm leaking a little bit into 8C here. That contract is a time and materials contract, which means that if it were authorized for approval tonight, we're not committed to spend any money. only if and when do we come back at a separate board meeting, will the board then have to authorize an additional spending authority or a not to exceed contract amount for GHD to do additional air testing, air ambient testing. We had been quoted a price about $4,000 per test site based on Willowbrook's experience, or at least what they've been quoted to do 8 particular sites. That may go up a little bit. If we do less than 8, it might go down a little bit. If we do more than 8, it just kind of depends. But before any work and monies are spent, GHD will provide us with a detailed quote and analysis of what it will cost to perform the testing that the board so describes as being necessary. Staff also met with our community group in Burr Ridge over the past week. We've made a lot of good contacts through that organization, so I acknowledge their involvement in this matter as well. We've established a good dialogue on this matter. Staff is committed, as well as the entire village, to seeing this through, whatever that conclusion may be. So we've been very glad to meet new friends in our community on this particular matter of importance. That's all.
In addition to that, Willowbrook is also formed their own task force, if you don't already know it, outside of the anything the government's doing. Independent scientists from all over the country. They have, I'm not sure how much they're going to spend, but there's a lot of money. There's nothing more important going on right now at Willowbrook to find out, to get to the bottom of it. They are, of course, relying upon, we're waiting for the US EPA ultimately. We've all asked for clarification, additional testing, and just clarification on what we know now, as well as what they're doing next. And we're waiting on that. I press them pretty hard. I've talked to the highest ranking official at the government meeting downtown. There was the highest government meeting I've ever been to with, like, as Evan said, probably 30 people. I even gave the top guy a ride to the airport, so I had some chance to talk to him and try to find out as much as I could. We also had contact with the director over there at NOM and Kathy Stepp, or was it Kathy Stepp, et cetera. It's been all encompassing, but we've done a lot of things so far. It's still a project, a portrait in progress, but I did want to get our village attorney to make some comments as to what we're doing, how we're doing it, what we're capable of doing. Can you add something to that?
We mentioned this the last time you discussed this as a board. You, as a local government unit in Illinois, whether home rule or non-home rule, do not have regulatory authority over pollution control matters. That is an area that is exclusively vested in the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Those two entities are now, if you've been watching this issue on the news, are fully engaged. They're aware of the issue. They are dedicating resources to the problem, including air sampling, either now or in the immediate future, as well as the actions that have already been taken by the company that is on the agenda this evening, with a proposed contract to do additional air sampling for and by the Village of Burr Ridge. They've already done testing in Willowbrook. Those results are expected shortly. We don't have a precise time frame, but once you get that information back, you can make a judgment about what additional testing you may need to have completed here in Burr Ridge. So although if you had the ability to regulate locally in this area, I'm sure you'd be examining that. That is not an authority that a local government has in Illinois.
Trustees, any questions of one of the three of us? Yes.
A question I had, two of them basically. When you started your review, did you say the first tests were done in February?
No.
What did you say was done in February? And you still don't have results or something?
Oh, I'm sorry. Those were stacked tests that were done in last month, September 21st. The tests were completed. However, we do not have full analysis of those results. Again, that was about 2 weeks ago.
You know, the way this stuff is getting bandied around, everybody's testing. When are you going to get results? I mean, how long does it take? You know, everybody's waiting, and it seems that it's just hanging out there.
Yeah, we've been quoted. We were quoted at that September 28th meeting that Mayor and I attended. We were told between 2 and 4 weeks, and that was 2.5 weeks ago. So theoretically, that deadline is fast approaching, but the difference between doing and done could be very, very wide, so.
Yeah, and on that note, I grilled the deputy administrative assistant administrator. They have all kinds of long names in the federal government. But I said, I grilled them pretty heavily on it. He said, this is a quote from him. He said, "We are now fully engaged and working quickly, and we'll be putting hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million, into this to make sure that we get it right." I'm not quite sure what right meant, other than make sure we have the right information and get it. I hope it meant accurate tests, etc. But we certainly got the attention of the U.S. EPA, which the U.S. EPA, from what I could tell, really wasn't too involved in it. It was all more of the local offices of the federal government, but never people from Washington, D.C. We even had the highest ranking director, deputy administrator of the director of the U.S. EPA for Air and Radiation Services, Bill Wareham. He was on the phone for a solid hour with us back and forth at the meeting. So we have their attention, and that's what it took. It took that meeting, I think, to get the national's attention. So, any questions of us before I ask what kind of questions or concerns that the residents have? Okay, I have the clipboard here. I'm going to call out your names. I know it was called a sign-in sheet. I'm not sure if everyone wants to speak or not. I'm going to call your name, and I'm going to ask you to come to one of the probably that podium for now, and to speak. And you'll have maybe 3 to 4 minutes to ask questions, which time we'll go to the next person, and we'll be able to answer all those questions when you're done. So, Richard Morton, you are first, sir.
You really want me to try to fight my way?
You want me to get it?
I would do that.
Okay, there's.
Requirement, but a portable microphone might be a little.
Okay, the question is, does anybody know where the?
Yes, they're right there.
Can they go to the front?
Pardon?
For the camera, yep,
The
behind camera.
cameras are there, right there.
I think right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
How about we try this? Will this work?
You want to come in?
That'll work.
Okay.
That camera.
That should work.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Good evening.
trustees,
Rick?
Evan. My name's Richard Morton, Lake Ridge Club, Fur Ridge, Illinois. I've lived here since 1989. I'm troubled by my village's response to a problem that's affecting us all. Meanwhile, about 7,000 concerned citizens have joined a group called Stop Sterigenics. About 25,000 people have signed a petition to have Sterigenics cease operating. I first learned about this issue around August 25th, which by my math is about 44 days ago, and 4 board meetings ago. And I still feel compelled to be here asking questions about Sterigenics and what you're going to do about it. For example, despite, your name's Scott, right? Remember from a long time ago you were here all the time at all of the board meetings with Mr. Stricker. But what are the plans if there's an explosion at Sterigenics? That explosion may release large amounts of ETO into the air. By back of the napkin calculating, 500 pounds of ETO released into the atmosphere is going to create a vapor cloud that is an unimaginable size. If my math is right, it's going to be more than 8 miles and a density of 10 parts per million. What are we going to do if that happens? What are we going to do about the EPA's air toxic assessment that identifies us as having a cancer risk of 300 in a million? That's devastating to the community. I think there should be some strategies being put in place how to get that number reduced to rehabilitate the image of Burr Ridge. What are we going to do about the number of cancer cases that you can retrieve by looking at the Illinois Department of Public Health cancer database? And when you target it back to the community in increasing radius from Sterigenics, the rates of cancers appear to be higher than they should be in the background for all of Illinois. So I think it's a real problem. It's tangible, it's palatable, and a lot of people are scared about it, including myself. You know, the citizenry fight to get Sterigenics out of our community. And one of the things that concerns me is this back vent stack test stuff. That's only one vector where this gas could be emitted into the atmosphere. There's 100 other vectors that weren't analyzed when they captured those emissions. What's being done to test and evaluate that? And I think the testing should be expanded beyond just a simple snap and grab sample to some kind of real-time monitoring to give us some idea if this plant ever does emit large amounts of this gas so we can respond effectively. The next part is a bit personal and you'll understand it. Judy and I, along with many of our immediate neighbors, are living as a surviving breast cancer. And were we given breast cancer as a gift from Sterigenics and ETO? I can't answer that, but it was 11 years after we moved here. And I can't tell you with each year the requisite annual checkups, the waiting time from getting the cancer screens, the blood tests, and all of that. The waiting time is anxiety-filled and it's interminably long. And I wish none of you ever have to do that while you wait for the words, you're okay, you get another year pass. So this delusion that we can safely manage dangerous substances in dense population areas is the same one the Germans had when they said, we're smart, we're technologically advanced, we're meticulous. We can manage the use of explosive hydrogen in our passenger-carrying airships, like the Hindenburg. Works great. What's not to like? Right up until the point where you learn you can't and 36 people are dead. Don't let Burr Ridge become the next Hindenburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Susan Peterson.
Suzanne Peterson, 7250 Elm Street, Burr Ridge. Resident in Burr Ridge since 1981, homeowner since 1987. I have a couple questions and probably a couple comments in no particular order. A couple meetings ago when the consultant that the village hired to come in to give us guidance, when he was here, I know he was here to give us guidance. I see in the one report that he will give us guidance and interpret the data and advise the village. I would like to know if he has maybe suggested, along with what's going on in Willowbrook with air testing, could I recommend and ask for at least a few places in Burr Ridge close to Sterigenics be tested, possibly Harvester Park, where my children and my grandchildren visit and we walk still. Our community in Babson Park, Babson East, Babson West. I know it's costly, but maybe somewhere down the road there'll be some kind of retribution back to Sterigenics where the village could recoup their expenses. But I feel that in some way, as a village, now you said we're all in this together, so we're homeowners, we're friends, we visit the same locations within the village, we all go through Willowbrook, we go to Walmart, we go to Jewel, the whole bit, so we're all in this together. So if that's true, then everybody feels on this board probably slightly like I feel. You want to hold your breath a little bit when you're driving towards Sterigenics or going to Target. You're a little fearful now of even going that way. I know I am. And I work in Willowbrook, so I live in Burr Ridge, I work in Willowbrook. This is not a good thing, even waiting another day, 2 more days, 2 more weeks to get the air testing results. is just a day too long. I mean, one of you may not have cancer today, but what if you're told tomorrow you do? I mean, it's life-changing. It was life-changing for me. And I don't want my daughters to get cancer. I don't want my grandchildren to get cancer. So we're all breathing this still every day that they're not shut down from emitting ETO, we're all breathing it, whether we can see it or not. And that's what we have to keep in our mind, is that it's still going on even today. It's bad. And I don't want any ETO from any other buildings, manufacturing in our town. It's gonna give us a bad name someday. So we really shouldn't have that happening in our own town, if we do or think we do. And I think there was a question brought up to the village board, are there any other manufacturing businesses in Burr Ridge that are emitting any kind of maybe cancer-causing chemicals that we should be aware of, that maybe we could do something about now? So please, my terror and my concern for all the children that go to all the schools, that play at all the parks, that are in our yards, I mean, they have this, they're subjected to this tenfold. We're adults. Our lives are shorter than theirs. So let's help them all out by getting these results now and get our town tested too. Let's really show the other towns around us that we are as concerned as the village of Willowbrook. And stop Sterigenics. We're all homeowners. Willowbrook, Burr Ridge, Darien, Western Springs, Willow Springs, LaGrange Park. We're all homeowners. Maybe the name Stop Sterigenics is in front, but we're all homeowners in Burr Ridge, just like you. Thank you.
Alice Krampitz.
I did see that Alice Cramp at 7515 Drew. I did see that we've updated our website with some of the questions answered, but we haven't seen the map. We did request to have that map bigger picture because it cut off at Madison Street. So I'm wondering if that has become available or if someone has it, because I'd still like to see where my house is on there, if I'm red or green or dead or whatever. So, and will you post that on the web if you get that? Thank you.
Got that? Okay. Yes. Kathleen O'Hara.
Meeting. You all know me. I live on Grand Street in Burr Ridge. Mayor Straub, I am glad to see you here tonight. I wish that you'd been more involved up until Friday the 28th. Just want to not spend too much time on the past, but as you mentioned, the highest ranking officials were in full force at that Friday meeting. I'm glad that the meeting happened because I guess that's what it took for a wake-up call for you to be responsive. I'm very glad that you were there. I think somehow the message still hadn't really gotten to you until that meeting, so I'll look forward at this point. On that note, I've been very pleased to meet with Evan, sort of an unofficial liaison from the Stop Sterigenics group, which, yes, now does have close to 7,000 members online. Working together is the goal. So I have been glad to help with the educational piece. Last time I offered my green binder, I was able to sit down with Evan and go through a lot of the facts. I'm still a little bit stuck on this municipalities of air zones, trying to stay optimistic and positive, but tonight, as I'm listening, I hear the attorney lingo sounding almost dismissive of the obligation or the request from the community to not draw a line imaginary in the sky as to where the EPA, Illinois EPA, or the Village of Burr Ridge stands on the ambient air testing. On that note of education, I just want to make sure that everybody here understands that the stack testing that's been referred to is not ambient air. The stack testing from Sterigenics has always been 99%. I have all the documents. It is merely an efficiency measure that their new controls are working. They've never not passed this. This is inconsequential, it's neutral, it's not good news. The proliferation of that information comes only from Sterigenics touting it as some type of in compliance. Yes, their control panel is in compliance, but guess what? They were required to do that no matter what. That didn't come from any pressure from any group. It's just a matter of permit compliance. So with the, I guess, maybe misunderstanding about what tests we're waiting for, I'm not sure that the ambient air testing's been done. I'm under the assumption that it has been, but please don't misconstrue the stack test with ambient air testing, because what we really are relying on is the ambient air testing with a third party. Some people might not want the Illinois EPA to be doing it. Some people might have more story on that. I'm not going with conspiracy theories, but please don't misconstrue reports from Sterigenics on the stack testing. It's meaningless. It's always passed. It's always been 99-point-something%. As far as follow-up items tonight, I would also hope that you'll all take the reins of following up on the home rule, which did pass tonight at the Willowbrook meeting unanimously. That will affect our zip code. I've already asked this question. I'm a novice at all of this. I don't know the definition of home rule, but I do know that they will be putting it on the April referendum. This is hot off the press. It was 20 minutes ago. So the idea that home rule could be something that goes on in April seems like an awful long time to wait, but at least we have contingency plans and we have Plan B. So I would hope, Mayor Straub, if you're approached with this new information, that you educate yourself and don't wait to be the last one to join in, like September 28th meeting. I mean, I would hope there's communication tomorrow morning about how this affects our community. So the ambient air testing, the home rule. The third, and probably my most emotional piece, is that I would ask that you not promulgate or even worse, proliferate any documents produced by Sterigenics or the EOSA, which is an ethylene oxide lobbyist group. If for community transparency, you can mention that they have issued a response or embed that in part of the news that you put out. I know I got a lot of flack actually on the recent, Susan has it, the flyer that everybody got in their homes. I have sort of defended on your all behalf that the flyer that arrived last Friday didn't take into account that the mayor has changed his tune and that you now are on board with not proliferating false information. So the flyer that came home to our homes was not updated as far as your take on whether or not we need to have an action plan. The flyer that everybody received, which Susan, this one, that's still kind of not up to speed with where my understanding is post last Friday, the 28th, things stand. So there's been question, can community members contribute to the newsletter? Can they at least make sure that it doesn't seem like we're the last to join in on activism? As far as how you identify the difference between fact and Sterigenics, I know again there's been comments from the mayor about that maybe this is rumors or falsehoods. The only place that is putting out falsehoods is Sterigenics. So the propaganda, as an example, it's more than semantics if this statement is lifted that it's not an immediate threat, which is in the newsletter. Okay. It's implying that there's some good news here. There's not. Ethylene oxide's odorless, it's colorless. It presents a chronic, insidious, ongoing, unmitigated health hazard in just two categories, known carcinogen and known mutagen. Okay, don't mince words. There is, as of tonight, no evidence that the air is safe. It's not any more safe now than it was in May when the ambient air testing came through from the NATA. So we can't have misunderstanding continue to come out of this venue, basically, that says in any way that if the definition of an emergency or an immediate health risk means that there is a spill that then becomes remediated, I would have rather had an immediate health risk. I would have rather had something that could be remediated and cleaned up, and we could see that the oil was no longer there, or the explosion was no longer in pieces. But we can't identify that because it's a chronic, insidious, odorless, not visible gas. Some of the standard of reporting pollution actually relies on the eye seeing a visible plume. That's not going to be the case. So I would ask that the language or the wording that you lift from sources does not falsely assure any. We don't need any false placating of the fact that this is as bad as it was. We have no evidence to the contrary. So in closing, I would say if the temporary injunction does go through, you can be prepared to know that Kathleen Hoffman, the VP of Sterigenics, also the silent partner of the EOSA, will issue a statement saying that all's good, that they are in compliance. But please know that it stays in the air for 200 days. So if it shuts down tomorrow, the air is not clean. Okay, I can give you the reference on that. I think it's actually 211 days. So I really want to make sure that as you're now on board, Mayor Straub, that the message coming through is that this is ultimately concerning, not just the 1990s, but tonight it's still a concern. And that would really be respected by the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom O'Toole.
Thank you. Tom O'Toole, 115 79th Street in Burr Ridge. I wasn't expecting to address the board this evening, but I was at the Willowbrook board meeting this evening. And as she said, the home rule referendum did pass with the Willowbrook board unanimously. So that's on down the road. That's going to take place in April to get that on the ballot. But a couple of things that I'd like to point out, and the awareness of this issue within the community seems to be really lacking because we've tried to get information out to the community. But a lot of people believe that Sterigenics and the testing and everything is fine. That is the pervasive feeling of the people in the community who are not following the issue. So that message needs to be changed. Regardless of what the testing results are, people believe that Sterigenics has been shut down and there's no further risk, and that nothing could be further from the truth. So I believe that in village communication, we need to accentuate the fact that this is an ongoing problem. A couple of things that really should add additional urgency to this problem is that, and when I speak about this term, I'm going to use the term cancer cluster. That may not be an official term that the EPA or the Health and Human Services uses, but in being at a couple of meetings, fact-finding meetings, anecdotally, within the last year and a half, 15 new cases of cancer in the area around Midway Drive and Route 83 in the residential area. Now, that's something that really should be alarming to a lot of people. Now, when we say Willowbrook, we have to include Burr Ridge as part of Willowbrook because, I mean, it's an imaginary line that separates us, and the air doesn't have an imaginary line. So we have to be aware of what is going on in Willowbrook, how it affects us in Burr Ridge. Health reasons aside, you have to throw in property values on top of this because, you know, we're all concerned about health, but who wants to move into a community that is part of a quote-unquote potential cancer cluster? Now, here are some statistics that really should drive home the point that this is an urgent matter. Willowbrook, tag it with Burr Ridge, Willowbrook is now #1 in the state. It is the highest ranking state community at risk for cancer in the state of Illinois. It is now number 19 in the U.S. 76,000 cancer tracks across the United States are being followed by, and I'm not clear whether it's the EPA or Health and Human Services, but Willowbrook is number 19 out of 76,000 cancer tracks being followed. So that just stresses the urgency with which this board and the communities need to start working together to come up with answers and solutions to this problem. I really don't have much more, but I did want to come over and relay the fact that, you know, the unanimous decision by the Willowbrook Board did take place tonight, so it's a step in the right direction.
Tom, you mentioned the statistic. Can you tell us the nature of the statistic?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell us the nature or what the source of that statistic that you gave?
That is documented data on the Stop Sterigenics website. It is from the EPA or the Health and Human Services. So if you want to check the validity of it, feel free. Perhaps perhaps Evan can check that out. But this is information that is being presented to the board. It was presented to the board this evening. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you have something to add, I'm sorry. You can't talk from there, and you have to wait till we're all done. Or if you'd like to pass up that information to us, you're welcome to.
ChicagoMagazine.com is that source.
ChicagoMagazine.com is the source. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'm sorry. I jumped over Mark Toma because he spoke earlier, but I just want to make sure. Mark, do you want to talk about this at all? Okay. And Eduardo Davila?
Good evening. Eduardo Davila, 124, West 79th Street, Burr Ridge, Illinois, just down the block. I just got two questions that just kind of help me understand more about this. From what I understand from what y'all have been saying, you said that the village cannot really regulate emissions from Sterigenics because it's outside of our boundaries. And I'm trying to understand what strategies are you developing to attack this and understand what we can do, basically. And moreover, more importantly, actually, what are you doing to make sure we're informed as a community, and most of all, secure in knowing where we're going? Because I feel there's a lot of unknown, and I want to know. That moves on to my second question. I was reading up on this, and apparently Sterigenics was caught and was fined $50,000 back in 2013. I'm wondering if there's any other, crises before 2013 that we should know about, and I just want to understand this. I'm asking this as someone who wants to live here, who wants to have kids here. I grew up here, and I've lived a healthy life. I've worked out, did everything I can to live good, and now I have that foundation shaken because something outside my control is threatening my life, and I don't know how to feel about that. And I don't know how everyone's handling that, but it's something fundamentally that we should be way more informed than we currently are. And that's why I'm up here just asking very poignantly where we're going with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, that was the last person that signed up for the speaking. Is back at the board. At this time, we'll go through as many of those questions as we can tonight. Any questions that we don't have answers to, we'll do the research on. We have because this this is something we're all learning. This is the old your first rodeo. This is all of our first rodeo. This has never hit us before. So we're really we're trying to do the best we can from all angles and trying to learn as we can and try to go to the best sources. And we appreciate some of the research that we're not going to be able to have. Like I know Rick Morton has sent us a bunch of stuff, and I know Kathleen. We're looking at everything that we can, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it too. We're trying to. I've been here 31 years myself, so I'm certainly. And my daughter grew up here, and and been here for a long time and plan on staying here for a long time. So we're all trying to figure out what happened, what's going to happen next, and how we can get really to the bottom of it. So on that, I'm going to ask Evan, since he was recording as many of these questions as we can, and we'll go through as many as we possibly can, and then of course the trustees are welcome to jump in if they have some answers that we don't. So, Evan?
Okay, Ms. Peterson, you had asked for places and birds to be tested, and make some suggestions.
Can you make sure you speak up too?
Sorry. The suggestion was where in Burridge can we test? Part of that GHD contract, which is up next on the board's agenda, is to establish the opportunity to do testing of that nature. That'll be HC, I believe. It's up to the board at that point where and when we test. The EPA has said that testing will occur relatively soon. Again, we have not heard a date as to when that will commence. So again, that GHD contract is there for an option for the board to have to not rely on the EPA's time frame. They could get denied for any reason under the sun. They're a large organization that doesn't always move quickly. So again, that is there to provide the board with the flexibility. That's their prerogative on how they use it. But again, that is on the agenda this evening. And again, they can test anywhere that the board wants them to test. It can be on the south end of Burr Ridge, it can be on the north side of Burr Ridge, it can be outside of Burr Ridge if they wanted to. Really, the options are unlimited, and it's up to the board. Alice, you had, yes, we can post a larger map to the website. I'm pretty sure we have it. It's that kind of colored red map that you're looking for, kind of understanding the plume, for lack of a better word. Yes, I'll try to track something a little larger and scope down. I know what you're talking about. It kind of stops at the bridge, but you want to see more of Burr Ridge. Yes, we'll certainly track that down. If we don't, we'll get it from somebody who does. Thank you for that comment, though.
Can I stop you for a second? I think we missed one from Rick. Rick Morton about what happens if there's an explosion. And we have our deputy chief of police here. I don't know if he could answer some emergency type of emergency evacuation type things. You have more knowledge about it than anybody else does. It's certainly more than anybody sitting up here at the dais. But Mr. Morton asked questions. What happens if what kind of plans are there if there's an explosion at Sterigenics? Again, I don't know if that's been the first time you've asked that question, but I know you've been had all kinds of training, and especially even the FBI training recently. So you might have some exposure to this. And if you don't, can you answer what you can, and then also get back to Rick on anything you don't have an answer?
Sure. Every town has an emergency operations plan that's approved by DuPage County, which has a larger emergency operation plan, and it takes into account things that, large chemical spills, small chemical spills, explosions, evacuation areas, and in those plans we have evacuation centers. So if something were to happen on one side of town, we might have a source at Gower School or one of the hotels, or even in the village hall or the police department. So it really depends on where something happens and when it happens, but the Village of Burr Ridge has an emergency operation plan with an all hazards plan. The Village of Willowbrook has one, the county has one, and Tri-State Fire Protection District, all the fire protection districts have them. So there are plans in place to take into account any type of emergency, from a natural hazard to a man-made hazard.
May I ask a question or follow-up to that?
Actually, I'd rather you not. If you want to meet with him separately later or tomorrow,
I'll talk to you afterwards if you like, sir.
There's a longer discussion.
We don't have any idea what it is.
Okay.
Well, it depends on where something would occur.
Well, we're talking about Sterigenics. And let's say they had 10,000 pounds of this gas stored in the facility. What are you going to do to protect us from being engulfed by a massive gas cloud?
And if you have an answer to that?
I would have to
get back to him?
Get to the specifics of that emergency and look into the plan. So I can get back to him.
Okay. Thank you. And you're welcome to come back, or he can visit your house for more discussion. And certainly that's something that we all be curious about. Perhaps you can also find out more information on that as well. It's always the what if scares the heck out of all of us. Next.
I think this is more of a point than question, but Ms. O'Hare, you had talked about the difference between stack testing and ambient testing. We'll be sure to put a definition as to what each are actually measuring on the website. It is an important distinction that's not a subtle difference. So I'll certainly elaborate more on that this week and put something on our website. But you're correct, the stack is very localized and the ambient is very regional. So understanding that stacks may come back negative while the ambient may come back positive, or lack of a better term there. So yeah, we can certainly elaborate on that particular point. So thank you for pointing that out.
On the subject of home rule, we want to have Scott elaborate on that. You mentioned that they mentioned about Willowbrook maybe going to home rule, or it was passed tonight. Can you explain to all of us what the difference is between home rule and non-home rule?
In fact, Vicki, that was one of the questions I was going to ask, if he could give some explanations as to difference, because I know we've looked at it in the past several times and we've always voted not to go. But if you could give some examples of differences.
Sure. A home rule county or municipality has the ability to regulate its own government and affairs, those matters that relate to its government and affairs, without having to rely on a statutory provision that the General Assembly has enacted. Without having that power granted you, you have the ability, the open ability, to deal with your own government and affairs. So the typical issue that comes up for a home rule municipality is taxation. Home rule municipalities have the ability to impose local taxes in whatever fashion they may choose, without having to rely on a statutory authority to do that. If the other issue that's being raised here in Willowbrook, the reason or the basis for placing a referendum for home rule or to decide whether or not to be a home rule municipality is this issue, the local regulation of pollution or contamination, it won't matter. There is no ability for a home rule unit or a non-home rule unit to regulate pollution control matters in Illinois.
Now, but is there a possibility of some other loophole that they can use for permit that you know of?
Not that I know of, no. It's an exclusive state authority to regulate in the area of pollution control. So the General Assembly would have to change that doctrine, that legal doctrine, in order for home rule municipalities to be able to regulate in this area. I'm not so I'm not trying to get into an argument that home rule is not the answer here, or that we shouldn't be discussing that issue. Willowbrook has, if they're electing to become a home rule municipality, that's fine. I'm not sure it's the solution here to deal with this issue. There are other potential solutions, which I think we're attempting to identify, that are going to be a lot faster, first of all, and that are based in your authority to regulate, the Illinois EPA and the federal EPA.
You mentioned about gives us the ability, home rule gives us the ability to basically govern ourselves. Can you give us an example of that, of other towns where that was debated, and what the reality is of that? What does that mean with money, with
I represent one town that's a home rule municipality by population, and the other 3 municipalities I work with have all placed these same referendum questions on the ballot, seeking to become a home rule municipality, and they have been voted down resoundingly because the local residents, local citizens, do not want to expand the authority of their local government to regulate beyond the existing state statutes. At least that is the typical result of a home rule referendum. It gets voted down.
As I recall, this is relatively new. We know about home rule and non-home rule. I've heard about it. I know Bridgeview was one that switched to home rule, as I recall. So that way they were able to build the stadium. Is Oak Brook home rule?
I think it is by population, probably. Oak Brook isn't?
7,000. Tiny.
It's
Oak Brook or Oak Brook Terrace?
Sorry, Kathleen, if you really shouldn't be speaking from there because no one can hear you on the microphone, and I don't know that's really up for debate, but do you have something you want to ask him or have us clarify later? Okay, so I asked Tim what the question was, so if he knows of a few, but as far as anything else about running home rule?
I'm not for or against home rule. I'm just describing what it is and how it generally operates. So.
Mickey?
Yes.
The last time we really got into it, when we discussed it, the thing that most people, especially in today's situation, most people turn it down because if you're a home rule, like one of the biggest things we work on every year is the budget. We have to live within a budget. In a whole room community, if you're over the budget, you can raise taxes. Unlimited. You don't have to worry about going to the people. You just raise taxes. And that's the one thing that we put a kibosh on.
As opposed to what? So how can we raise taxes now?
We've got to go to a referendum to raise taxes.
Okay. That's what
You know, and give it out like we did when the bond issue was up.
Right.
And we wanted the extra money and it was voted down. Well, if we were home rule, we wouldn't have to even talk to the people. We could just, on the board, pass something and say, we're gonna keep the tax money in existence.
The village board then has a lot more power, a lot more control.
Well, it's got a lot more power as far as money goes.
Right now, we're at 2% limited, right, isn't it?
You're limited, but if you're a homeroom community, you basically don't have much of a limit on how you can tax and how you can spend your money.
Thank you. Okay. Evan, next question.
I had the next question as being from Mr. O'Toole regarding, not necessarily, again, a question regarding the cancer rates. We'll look more into that with our consultant. I've looked at some statistics as provided by residents, which seem to lead me to believe that we do have an elevated cancer incidence in this area, but I want to look more into that data myself. I just haven't had the chance to really drill down on it, but I have seen some of that information come down from the IDPH and other related agencies. So to your point, a couple of questions from Mr. Davila. What strategies are we being used to stop Sterigenics? I think what Mayor has, I'm going to kind of defer to Mayor here, but there's not a lot of official items that we officially can use. We are not a state. Obviously, we're a non-home rule community. As our attorney has stated, there are only so many tangible legal quivers in our arrow at this point. The Mayor has signed several letters to the EPA as well as the state, joining other mayors in the district, the region, asking that either Sterigenics prove their way to good faith testing or whatever they need to do to prove that they're not releasing toxins, or that they shut down immediately. These are the words that are available on our website, which is kind of my answer to the second point. These letters are signed in his handwriting on our website as of this past week. Those things have gone and they are in the right hands. We've also communicated with the ETA that statuses regarding the investigation, whatever that happens to be updated as timely as humanly possible. Again, we had sent several emails and a certified letter to the EPA stating that a statement regarding this issue be released last week. And again, that statement was never issued. We have still not heard anything from this organization at this time. There's that commitment that we want to have that community meeting, that follow-up to the original meeting that took place in Willowbrook. Mayor had volunteered a location in Burr Ridge. We're still discussing about where that should actually occur. There's still just ongoing discussion about where it would go, but that will be there to help inform the residents from the EPA, straight from the official source, as to what is actually occurring and when it will actually occur. And so we want to hold EPA's feet to the fire on that, because they told us in a meeting in front of every other elected official who represents you that A, statements would come forward, and B, a meeting would be held so that you can come and ask questions in a live meeting to get answers from them. Because on a certain point, the village of Burr Ridge is limited to what gets sent to us on a certain level. We've exhausted a lot of our legal options. We've written letters, we've made the phone calls on your behalf. We continue to do those. We're not suggesting that one letter is sufficient or will be the end-all be-all, but at the same time, we do need to understand that we are just somewhat limited in what we can officially do. This is not even in our town, the Sterigenics facility that is. The problem does exist around the area. But we are working quite hard to understand that those people continue to listen to us and get results in this matter. The second point that you were making is regarding the communication strategies the village is employing. As often as is humanly possible, we're trying to post things on our website. If you go to our village website, right on the homepage, there is a live, we'll call it on-demand link, that if things are received from agencies or other official communications that are relevant to this particular ongoing matter, we post those as soon as possible. One other thing that Mayor had done.
On that,
go ahead.
Let me just add on that. This is one of the problems we've had, is troubles we had as a village. We have like 5 different ways of communicating with the village. And we have the Nixle, police report, we have the website, we have the app, we have e-briefs, we have, there's just too many ways. And we haven't figured out the ideal way of where everybody would give us their email or something. We still, as a village, still don't have that. If you have any suggestions, meet with us later and let us know, but we're always trying to figure out the better way to communicate, because that's how we can, I think, get through most of this and certainly get an alert out to somebody right away. We have, again, too many different ways of communicating. So it's almost like good news and bad news all wrapped up in one. So your next comment?
I was just going to say, before this meeting, I put together these fancy binders, taking a page out of Kathleen O'Hare's way of doing things. All the trustees got one for the meeting. The purpose of these binders is to try and really condense all of the things that we've received on an official basis via emails, study results, communications, letters, inquiries, whatever it happens to be. If it has something to do with Sterigenics, it got included in this, and we'll be continuing to add to it as time goes on. We've kind of all realized this is a confusing subject, and what we wanted to do as staff was provide the trustees with just a quick and easy way to understand what they're looking at. Again, if something needs to be added to that, we will before every board meeting or as often as needed. If there's something that's quick, needs to go out, we email it. But part of the effort here is to try and put more paper in front of people, because sometimes paper is just a little bit easier. Being informed, having the ability to understand is the first step to actually understanding what's in front of you. You also had a point about a previous fine on Sterigenics. I have no idea regarding the answer to that, but I will follow up with that with you. So thank you for both those points.
We thank you, Evan, for pointing out that the correlation between the Sterigenics and EOSA, certainly when anybody's involved with both sides, there's a conflict of interest. You're not quite sure what to believe. Good point. I think I sent out a Sterigenics report with my private email report that was from Sterigenics. That was probably one-sided. So I get it. I won't do that again. But the only thing I repeated was regarding the statement about let's see, what was it? That there is no immediate health threat. That's actually, I got right off the Willowbrook. Willowbrook is the one who posted that, because this is not a personal, email from Sterigenics or anybody else. These are actually government reports. The ATSDR report is the one who said that initially, and we're still trying to figure out what does that mean. And the catchword is immediate, so we're trying to figure out what that means. But we're trying to get the most information, the most accurate information out to everybody that we possibly can. So, is there anything else any questions that I think we missed?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Any discussion, trustees, suggestions, questions?
The question that keeps coming to me is, first of all, I can't believe all the delay in actual getting testing. But the thing I think about is they updated their scrubbers on emission by over 90%. And if, say, the tests come out just above the okay line, what was it a year ago before they put the 90% in?
And what effect that is, so.
Pardon?
And what effect that had.
And what effect that has. That's the question that really bothers me. And that's one that I'm gonna stay on to find out. What was it like 2 years ago before they put these big scrubbers in?
Trustee Model?
Just briefly, I just want to say, I share the concern of the residents. We're all confused and concerned, and I just want to defend the mayor a little bit here. I've talked to you about this. I think you have been engaged. This is kind of like shock. A lot of us are in shock. We're handling it differently. Everybody's handling it in their own way, but I don't want there to be any confusion that the mayor has not been engaged, involved, or concerned. I think, we're trying to do our best. We're trying to figure it out. We share your concern. We want to figure it out and get it right here, but it's a confusing, evolving situation. So I just, wanted to make sure that I'm very aware you have been engaged and quite concerned about this.
It's a couple sleepless nights, so. Trustee Francis?
Yeah, a few points I want to make and clarify. The Illinois EPA granted Sterigenics a permit to operate and to emit ethylene oxide for a time period of 2015 to 2020. That's the duration of the permit. They're allowed to emit it at the back vent stacks. That's a known emissions point or points. There's other emissions points that they're not regular emissions points, but let's say we're unloading ethylene oxide to their facility. There's a flange on the tank at the ethylene oxide tank that leaks. There's a sample valve, and some of the material is tested and sampled for clarity and purity, and some is emitted there. And there's many other possible emission points in that plant that aren't accounted for. So, and the distinction about the back vent, that the stack testing, as they're calling it, and then sample testing that is done in the village, or that we might do in our village, are two different and completely different entities, two different things. This stack testing is going to tell us what they are emitting at a known emissions point. The sample testing that we may do here in the village and that is being done in Willowbrook will tell us of all those potential places that ethylene oxide may emit from at that plant, including a few that I mentioned, what that is the gross effect, the long-term effect, the gross emissions, what our residents are seeing, what the human population surrounding the facility is seeing. So we talk about a meeting on October 8th to consider the GHD services as Plan B for waiting to see what the Illinois EPA might be doing. Well, we've been waiting for the Illinois EPA to do a lot of things for us, and some they have and some they haven't, but I don't consider this to be a Plan B. I consider it to be Plan A, that we find out right now, engage this company right now, to see how all these possible emissions points are affecting our residents. And, I see this map here, and thank you for providing this, with all the red on it. And this is a computer model, right? And I think of computer models, and we all think about this. The weatherman, he has computer models, is it going to snow on the north side? Is it going to rain on the south side? 50-50 chance? Well, this isn't a 50-50 chance on this stuff. We need to know exactly how our residents are being affected. And there's no imaginary wall on Madison Street or on North Frontage Road or South Frontage Road or on I-55. It just goes anywhere it wants to go, whichever way the wind blows, and it sticks around for 200 plus days, and it's affecting all of us. I lived in this village for 40 years. 11 years in Carriageway and 29 years in Brooksville South. My children grew up here, and we've all been affected by it. We've all breathed it in, whether we wanted to or not. When we've driven down Madison, we've gone over to the 7-Eleven, whatever. So we need to start this testing immediately and not wait. Thank you.
Evan, do you recall or do you have any notes on what the U.S. EPA mentioned about the testing, as far as what kind of testing they're doing, and also when they said the next 2 to 4 weeks? I know.
Yes. So.
And by the way, again, as a reminder, I commend the village of Willowbrook. They don't trust anybody anymore. From what they're reading, what they're seeing for the Illinois EPA, the ATSDR, the US EPA, that's why they hired, and they can hire, this task force, which is of scientists from all around the country, which are, they even put on retainers so that they're not affected by any other outside influences, and trying to get to the bottom of it. So, we're kind of hitchhiking on them. Same thing with GHD, where they were already planning putting testing, I think, Gower Middle School. That's in Burr Ridge as part of that. Harvester Park certainly was one of them that I know that we wanted to do. There's also a question about inside versus outside, and there's and to a couple people's point, whether or not it's at 100% during 100% of production time or not, and is there a truth to all the other things we've heard about it? So that's what we're trying to get at the bottom of. We're really somewhat hitchhiking on Willowbrook because they have the major dollars running toward it and major special task force, and trying to work in conjunction with them as best we can. So that's what we're trying to do with the GHD. And if I hear, I want to hear from other trustees regarding Trustee Francis' comment. If you have any other questions or motions.
Well, I echo Trustee Francis' comments because I was wondering myself, if Willowbrook is committing to this test, why don't we? I think we should commit to it and not wait for the Illinois EPA. Because I'm sure the Illinois EPA is going to do a test around Willowbrook as well, and whenever that's going to get committed. But I think we should just do the test the same time Willowbrook does in those high-risk areas. I know we have to define them, but whatever those areas are, Harvester Park and Gower Middle School, whatever they are, I want to get them tested so that we know. And I think if we hire this private company that will be accountable for those results, I think we're going to get them a lot quicker than a state or federal agency, because we want those results. And a private company is going to deliver them quicker than an agency will.
Trustee, you mentioned the Illinois EPA, but let me just for clarification, see if Evan remembers. Is it the Illinois EPA doing these tests or the US EPA doing these tests?
From what I can understand, the stack, so there's the stack testing and the ambient air testing. The GHD testing is for ambient air testing only. It will not be for the stack testing. Correct. The stack testing relies on access to private property that they may not grant us, but we can ambient test anywhere. So my understanding, the stack testing was completed by a firm hired by Sterigenics and monitored by the US EPA and ILEPA. Then the ambient air testing that is forthcoming is being conducted by the federal EPA. And Burr Ridge has requested to be a part of that ambient air testing by the federal EPA.
Thank you. Trustee Snyder?
How can we follow Trustee Francis and put a motion or go into Evan? How can you put in, think that we can all decide, put an engagement and letter, hire the testing to get it started rather than wait?
So the way, that's the next item on the agenda, obviously. It's 8C. 8C is to award a contract for air quality assessment services. Now, if you say, please go ahead and test these, I'd like to hear kind of specific locations as to what it looks like so we can get an understanding of A, what time frame it looks like, and B, the scope of the study. That's what they're going to provide us with. We'll quickly go out and get that quote from them, bring it back, and we'll get going. So I'd like to kind of get some understanding of what the scope of the contract that you'd like to see originally.
Trustee Francis?
I sent a list of potential test sites to you 2 weeks ago. And to reiterate what those test sites were: Babson Park, Harvester Park, Village Center, Village Hall, Elm School, Gower Middle School, and any other areas of concentration of the population that we may see fit. But that was a starting point, and I'm certainly, that's not carved in stone, that's just suggested. There's many other places that could be tested as well, but I just threw those out there to start discussing potential test sites.
So I recommend that you make an official motion with those as a potential list, knowing that some of them may change based on redundancy or prudence if we don't told that, for example, Babson Park and Harvester Park are right next to each other, so if that makes sense, or even or based on, like I told, Willowbrook was planning on having Gower Middle School already, but we can double check with them.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So that you want to make an official motion and to approve this with your recommended list?
Well, I could do that, yes, but was there any other discussion about what was in front of us and what the residents' comments were concerning stereogenics in general.
Didn't know what you want to do first, whatever you like.
No, I don't want to go out of order.
They're kind of together. I think these two topics are very much related. One's actionable, one's not. So,
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we engage GHD Services to conduct ambient air testing at sites to be determined by trustees and staff. The suggested sites that I have previously mentioned, I would leave Babson Park and Harvester Park separate, since those are areas of concentration of residents and of in Babson Park, and non-residents and residents in Harvester Park. I also think I mentioned Chestnut Hills, another concentrated area of residents that could is close by stereogenics.
right.
And I don't recall the dollar value, but we limited this to time and material.
There was $4,000 per location.
$4,000.
I just want to clarify, that was
Per
site.
Testing site, correct. Okay. And I want to make a comment about I'll go ahead and make the motion. And then
I'll second your motion.
Okay. And the beauty of using GHD is they're already testing in Willowbrook. There's tremendous consistency using the same company with the same methods and materials and equipment and personnel. And so we get consistent testing without having to interpret two sets of different data by two different entities. So piggybacking on Willowbrook is a good thing here. So we get consistent test results throughout the area.
Trustee Bottle, I'm sorry, Trustee Mattal.
I think we should move ahead and do something. I wanted to ask the attorney if you have any experience with other villages where such testing has been done, and do you know of any company that has a good reputation?
No, we were looking at one other company other than this one that is already engaged by Willowbrook, and we were not satisfied that their turnaround time was quick enough or that they were focused on this particular purpose. Doug had already looked into that.
Perfect. What I would recommend is if we could keep stereogenics as a center and draw like a mile radius around it, and then pick a couple of sites, then we can see how far it travels and in which areas, and test the air quality in those areas.
Trustee Schiappa, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I would like to identify those higher risk areas that would have more exposure to stereogenics. I mean, I live south. I would love to get my area tested as well. I mean, but we've got to make that decision of those higher risk areas in the village.
For example, I've heard of Madison Club, which is actually straight in line off stereogenics, where there have been a number of incidences of cancer.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would definitely want Madison Club tested.
Okay. Trustee Model?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that, it would be prudent maybe perhaps for us to authorize this, but get a little more information from GHD. I mean, none of us are really experts in this, and they probably have some input on where, our money would be best spent to do a proper sampling. So A, we're not overlapping with existing things, but B, we cover, south, north, east, west, all the corners, and maybe there'll be some suggestion, and maybe this is kind of a question for Scott. If we authorize this, could we remotely, do we need to convene another meeting to set the exact sites, or can we authorize it and then get some input from experts on what would be most prudent to test and then authorize it, via email or something, or no?
Right, you could always provide, the way the contract is structured, there is to be a meeting with village staff and representatives from the testing company to identify the sites that they're recommending, that we may be asking about, and then to describe the scope of the project and the cost. So the way that the contract is structured, that comes back to you after that meeting for an approval of the number of sites, the actual sites, and then the cost.
And can we approve that remotely, or do we need to convene a board meeting? Do we have to wait 2
You have
weeks
to
for another
approve the
board
cost here.
Okay.
Either on whatever they bill us, or you set a number here tonight that.
Yeah, can't we set a number not to exceed?
That's what I was hoping to get, is a number.
I think I would rather do that tonight so we can get going on it.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me, too.
I would amend my motion to say 20 sites at $4,000 per site, so that'd be $80,000.
Or whatever they deem prudent.
Okay.
I will agree with that and amend the motion. Just a second.
Okay. Is there a motion and a second? Any other discussion? May I have roll call?
I just
We have this right?
I want to just make sure I'm clear. We had originally recommended 7 sites, and then we come back and say we have authority to do up to 20 and 80,000 based on staff and GHD kind of consensus on the
Right.
matter. Okay.
If they think we need all of them, we'll test all of them, if we can.
I think one of the things that I was kind of hoping to get clear, and I think that gives me a lot of freedom on this, is there will be another cost for indoor versus outdoor. You know, we spend most of our times indoors at our homes, but certainly we go outside, so that'll just give us some understanding about what that will look like, but we'll clarify that.
You have up to 80 grand based on their prudence. We want to assure them they're safe. We want to know we're safe. So you got 80 grand, give us the best plan and you know,
Go with
it.
I would make the assumption that the indoor air quality is the same as the outdoor air quality.
I probably would agree with that.
At this
yeah.
point.
Right.
And unless we know otherwise.
May I ask another question? I've received several inquiries from residents who are not in Burr Ridge, talking about like the Skyline Drive neighborhood down by Speedway. Do we have consensus on whether we can test outside of village limits?
The unincorporated Burr Ridge.
Unincorporated Burr Ridge. We keep talking about it not stopping at property lines. I know they're not in the village, but I wanted to bring that up anyway on their behalf.
Let's make sure we get our village, my opinion is to make sure we get our residents taken care of first.
Yes.
And we have 20, and if there's extra sites left over from the 20 that we picked, then we'll consider Skyline Drive, other unincorporated areas as well, but let's.
I agree, just take care of the village residents first.
Well, and there's the retirement center right across, or the Spectrum Senior Living, that is Burr Ridge, it's right across the street. So if you test there, you
If
will
it
hopefully
spills
encompass the
over,
whole, yeah.
you know, then.
But again, let's see what the experts
Right.
tell us, because we're all prognosticating here, we don't
Would,
really know what we're doing.
would all the testing be at the same time, or do you think it'll be over a period of 6 months or whatever
Oh,
they
no,
recommend?
no. I have to think that we're going to try and do all this in one shot. I don't want to have this drag out. The whole point of having GHD come in is they're going to provide some scale and some quickness with a turnaround time that EPA probably cannot. So we're going to press for the most efficient, truncated time period humanly possible on this.
Okay.
Clear.
So we need a motion.
Motion. A motion and a second. No further discussion. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Kovesa?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. And just for those residents that might be here, next board meeting, I miss probably one board meeting a year, 1.5. Well, just so happens I'm gonna miss, my busiest time of year, I'm gonna miss one next time also, so just so you know ahead of time. However, I am actively engaged. 6 months ago, I started tracking how many hours I put in. Maybe I'd like to see it, they're welcome to. Put 33.5 in 2 weeks ago and 31 last week. I am engaged, even if I'm not here at the meeting. But I will be in touch, so. Under other considerations for announcement, deliberation? None, okay, yes?
I had asked to have 2 resolutions put on tonight's agenda concerning Sterigenics, and I was asked to defer those resolutions, but I would ask that those would be put on next meeting's agenda. And first resolution was asking Governor Rauner to instruct the state, Illinois EPA, State Attorney General, to suspend the Illinois EPA license at Sterigenics until it can be proved that there are 0 emissions from the facility and that immediate neighboring communities are not being harmed by their operations. And the second one was, because I was told it was Governor Rauner had the authority to do that, and also President Trump had the authority to do that. So the second resolution was to ask President Trump to intervene as well. So I was asked to defer those resolutions, but I'm asking that they be put on next board meeting agenda so that these government entities can hear from the trustees of the village who represent the residents as well.
So you want, no, I've sent a similar letter, but you want a letter separate from the trustees? Is that what you want? Is that what, okay. Any attorneys, that's fine. Yeah.
You're targeting the permit or the license as opposed to asking, they did consider an injunctive action, the Illinois Attorney General did, and they're not moving forward with that, but this would be a different request.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other residents that didn't speak yet, want to speak yet?
There's a,
Actually, if you want to, you have to come up to the microphone and introduce yourself and tell where you live. You're a resident, yes?
So, Catherine Camarena, 55 Deer Path Trail in Burr Ridge. I don't know if I need to speak because as we were talking, I just emailed all my questions to you, Evan. So I don't know if you, I mean, I'm happy to read them to the board, but I also just did email Evan with those questions. So I don't know if you guys have the opportunity to look at that like after the meeting or address it at a later date, but they've been sent.
why don't you go ahead and ask your question? Ask your questions
sure.
now.
Okay, let me just read my email. I believe you guys did address some of my questions, but I'll leave my thoughts out and just get to the chase here. So my question was, who requests, wait, we've already discussed the ambient air testing. Regarding the ambient air testing, I wanted to know what the duration of that would be. I think it should be continuous because Sterigenics has a history of being non-compliant, spilling, releasing, and contaminating things, and I don't think that we should ever put our faith in their integrity. And I also think that, and I don't know if this is possible, but I think that we shouldn't be held accountable for the mistakes and the things that they're doing. So if at all possible, I think they should be paying for this, and of course they're not going to, but I think we should try to find a way to have them fund this ambient air testing, the continuous ambient air testing, for as long as they are in our area, because I don't trust them and I don't think they should either. My next question was regarding the IDPH, or the Illinois Department of Public Health Cancer Incidence Study. I know that they were prioritizing a study in Willowbrook regarding again, how many cases of cancer there are, how many cases of cancer there were, and if they're related to the ethylene oxide that had been released into the air. And because ethylene oxide knows no boundaries, so I think that we should request to be rolled into that study too, if possible, because I know that there are people in Burridge that have been affected by that. So I wanted to see if we can be included in that. And I guess lastly on that point, I also wanted to know that if we are in fact able to be rolled into that study, can and would there be a registry set up for future cases of cancer that will be surfacing in the years to come, because you don't just walk past Sterigenics and get cancer the next day. I mean, this happens like 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So I think that something should be put in place for the future. So that was it.
I have a few answers if you want.
Okay, Evan has a couple of quick answers for you.
From my understanding, talking with EPA, ambient testing is done on 24-hour time periods. I'd also want to consult with GHD on what they think is the best way to provide the most durable results. I know the original stack testing, or the original testing from months ago, was done via grab samples and 12-hour samples. Grab samples are literally stand here for 10 seconds, take a sample and leave. It's not necessarily representative of ongoing conditions. So we'd want to make sure, to your point, that we have the most representative conditions of day versus night, peak versus non-peak, windy versus not windy. So I'm going to defer to GHD, but I have heard from the EPA that they, whenever they get around to their ambient testing, it would be a 24-hour sample. Regarding the cancer incidence study, I know that the time frame was supposed to be spring when that was due, based on what I had seen. We certainly, I think we may have already been inquiring and including into that. If we somehow haven't, I think that's pretty easy to recognize and get on with on a letter. Finally, talking with a friend who does work in public health, it's my understanding that these are monitored for a long period of time, because again, kind of like with our sampling, taking a snapshot in time is not as helpful as seeing trends over time. So it's my understanding that whoever conducts the incidence study will be monitoring this as a long-term issue, just to track those trends over time.
I'm not sure if this addresses your concerns. There is, and it may address something you raised earlier. There has been litigation filed, personal injury litigation filed against Sterigenics at the end of September. The complaint has been amended twice now, seeking to have a class certified from this area of some 1,000 thousands and thousands of citizens in this area, to sue Sterigenics for trespass, fraud, negligence, and for allegedly causing cancer in the area. So that is active litigation. Those attorneys likely have some additional information that they're relying on to file the suit in the first place. You may want to contact them as well. I have that information if you need it.
Rick, you wanted to address the board again? Okay, will you be able to come up and get a microphone?
Sure, I can come over.
I'm sorry for,
Not a problem.
if you, has additional things you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, with response to the Burr Ridge PD's emergency plan, I happened to go look, and the old message from August that was posted back in August where it inferred there was no problem, that's how I'm paraphrasing it, I would suggest it maybe be reconsidered and revised. Trustee Modell, did you say that there was some confusion? Because I don't think I have any confusion over this topic. I think I'm pretty well understanding it, and maybe you didn't mean us being confused about it, but I think the threat of ETO is real, and I think that the amount of damage that they've done is also real.
That wasn't what I meant.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. And the other point about the ambient testing, we don't know capacity of Sterigenics when the testing is going to be done. So to test on one given day strikes me as putting all of those test results in one basket. And I would think testing over several days would give a broader spectrum and a better chance to get a better representative sample of what may be affecting us. Test over the days, know the capacity. I think that's it. So thank you very much, Mayor, for the second opportunity. Oh, one other point to Scott's about that's the jurisdiction of Illinois EPA. Except that's old news. We know that, but you guys are the smart kids in the block, or the smart kids in the room. You guys need to be thinking about the questions. You need to be figuring out ways to help protect us. And I don't know what those ways are, but I'm looking to you to come up with the questions and not for us. I'd like to go back to just ignoring life and dealing with my homeowners association. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, reports and communications from village officials. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, one thing. Brush pickup. It'll be the last week of October. It'll be our last pickup of the year. So again, brush pickup week of October 29th. Don't miss it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Good. Okay, anybody else? Non-residents? And may I have a motion to adjourn? Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Snyder? Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Natal?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa? 6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. I thank you for joining us.